Now at Lowe's, faster quotes start at the Lowe's Pro Desk. Got a material list handwritten on a sticky note or saved as a photo? Perfect. Bring it to us and get a quote in minutes. And if you don't see what you need on the shelf, we'll help you get it. You can access thousands of products beyond what's available in-store or on Lowes.com, right from the Lowe's Pro Desk. Build quotes faster and source the materials you need to keep your jobs moving. Just like that, at Lowe's.
This episode is brought to you by Welch's Fruit Snacks. Back to school season can be tough on parents, but choosing a snack you and your kids can both get behind doesn't have to be. Stock up on Welch's Fruit Snacks, made with whole fruit and now made with no artificial dyes. It's a snack kids already love and one you can feel good about giving them. Go back to school with Welch's Fruit Snacks, now made with no artificial dyes.
Yes, well, I think it's like with any book I've written. It's a question of my wishing to find a book actually on a certain topic and not being able to find that. I start to do research, and once I'm about halfway through the topic, I wind up just basically writing my own book about the subject, because Nazca, for instance, is not well understood by the general public. The theories go from the idea that very primitive people did all of the work to aliens having done all the work. And so what I tried to do was cover all of the theories and reach a general conclusion at the end, but allow, of course, the reader to make up their own mind. The Nazca area is southeast of the capital city of Lima. It's about a 7-hour drive, and it's very desert. It's so desert-like that rarely does Nazca get an inch of rain per year. And so carved into the landscape, mainly in the area called the Nazca Plateau, which is almost as flat as a board, are these intriguing lines and geoglyphic animal and plant figures. And so they were only really discovered, I believe, in the late 1920s. And ever since then, there's been a lot of speculation as to what they represent and who made them. Yes, they are. Some of them are several hundred feet long. They were actually first discovered by a Peruvian archaeologist when he was investigating on top of one of the local hills. And then the most famous sort of rediscovery was when someone did fly over them and noticed how expansive the area is and how many of these lines and figures exist. Oh, very much so. And of course, Eric von Daniken was probably one of the people who brought the Nazca lines and figures to the general public's attention. It is a monkey. I'm not sure exactly which species it is, but there, of course, is also the hummingbird, and also there's a giant spider. Various other kinds of birds, and to ancient alien enthusiasts, the so-called astronaut, which is actually on the side of one of the hills, seemingly waving, is perhaps one of the most famous. Yeah, and he has two very large eyes. The thing is that it's quite a crude figure, so it's easy for people to speculate on who or what the astronaut was. But it's amazing, actually, especially to see it from the little planes that you fly over Nazca. Oh, it's a standard part of our coastal tour that we do south of Lima, where we go to Paracas and Nazca. You really do have to fly over the lines. And the planes are very modern and very safe, so it's not like you're taking your life in your hands. Oh, several square miles. And the thing is, they actually, which I include in my book, is they start from the coast of Peru. There's a huge geoglyph in the shape of a trident on the side of a mountain. Yes. It's about 500 feet tall. It's called the candelabro or candelabra. And then the geoglyphs continue on from there all the way to Nazca through an area called Palpa. And that's where there are at least 1,600 different geoglyphs. Well, there are many theories as to what it represents. The one fallacy is that people believe that it points actually to Nazca. It doesn't. It actually points directly south. And I think it was actually a navigational beacon because you can only see it from the ocean. And when you're on a boat out at sea, it's very obvious um, because of its size. But again, some people will have known about the candelabra. Many more people will have known about the Nazca lines and figures, but very few people know that there are, as I said, more than 1,000 of them in between the candelabra and Nazca itself.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Listening to this podcast instead of doom scrolling? Smart move. Another smart move? Getting help from one of State Farm's 19,000 local agents when you choose to bundle home and auto. Bundling, just another way to save with the Personal Price Plan. Prices are based on rating plans that vary by state. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability, amount of discounts and savings, and eligibility vary by state.
I'm not giving up. I am selling the building.
The final season of FX's The Bear.
The restaurant is flooded.
Everything's either going to be okay.
No, stop!
Or not.
We are outgunned and we are outmanned, but we have each other.
FX's The Bear, the final season. All episodes now streaming on Disney+.
Yeah, I actually, from what I've been able to find out, is that there were two cultures responsible. The Nazca being the famous one, which the area was named after. But prior to that, there was an older culture called the Paracas, and I think they were responsible for a good many of the geoglyphs and line and other figures. Well, actually, the making of the lines is very simple because the upper surface of the land is actually iron oxide. So it's a reddish brown and yellowish and gray kind of color. But just underneath the surface is a white clay. So actually on the TV series Ancient Aliens, I did make a short Nazca line just by scraping my foot across the ground. They're only possibly 10 or 20 centimeters deep. And so they physically would not have been that difficult to create. And the reason why they're still there is because the area is so dry and therefore rain doesn't have a tendency to damage them. And wind isn't that strong on the surface. It can be higher up, but on the surface itself, it's not disturbed very much. And so that's the reason, or one of the reasons why they're still there. Also, the very dryness of the land means that the surface is very hard, and so it would be very difficult for wind, for example, to disturb them too much. Well, it's thankful to one woman called Maria Reiche, who was a German immigrant. She studied and protected the lines for more than 50 years, and so it was mainly her work with her assistants that they uncovered some of the detail of the lines. And thankfully, the Peruvian government has made the whole area off limits to any human or automobile or motorcycle traffic. And so for the last several decades, the Nazca lines have been protected from any kind of human disturbance. Well, it's very important to to take into account these people who often independently have done this. Maria Reich, as far as I could tell, rarely got much assistance from governments in order to do her work. And, she lived in obscurity for a long period of time. Now she's regarded as being an absolute, cultural icon. But it's typical of people who do very profound work early on, almost anywhere on the planet. The general public either ridicule or dismiss them, and it's not until the people themselves finally realize that this work has been so important that they turn these people into icons. But we're very thankful for someone like that who wasn't born in Peru, but she embraced the land, she embraced the history, and if it wasn't for her, the Nazca lines probably at this point would have been destroyed by highways being driven through. There was talk about the whole area being turned into agricultural plots, and so thankfully, they are, we have a World Heritage Site. And the thing is also, of course, it has brought a lot of tourism to Nazca. So if it wasn't for the existence of the lines and the tourism, the city of Nazca and surrounding area would be much poorer than it is today. Well, basically going backwards in history, the Nazca themselves developed quite a high level of agricultural civilization up until about 500 or 600 AD. They appeared in the area about 100 AD, and they were the victims of a climate change that happened. So between 100 AD and about 5 or 600 AD, the whole area began to desertify quite rapidly. And so they crashed as a civilization again about 500 or 600 AD. Their origins are kind of obscure. They seem to have moved into the area from the northwest, and they, I believe, conquered a much older civilization called the Paracas, who were more or less a coastal people, but it was the blending of the Paracas culture and these incoming people that created the Nazca culture. And again, that's why we find the glyphs and figures and things from the coastal area moving inland and changing over time in terms of design as the lines and figures progress from northwest to southeast. They seem to have become more simplistic as they go towards the southeast, but more refined. And so the figures that the Nazca people themselves most likely made, such as the spider, the monkey, the hummingbird, are they're quite simple, but they're very clear and distinct. Whereas the older geoglyphs are more, I would say, fanciful, complex, and obscure. Very hard to decipher exactly what's being depicted. No, you can carbon date more or less based upon other artifacts that are found in the area. Anything which is of an organic nature, as in things made out of wood and other plant materials, can be carbon dated. Bones, of course. And then it's the pottery styles, because the Paracas style and the Nazca style were different. And so through all of those different different artifacts, you can piece a picture together. Actually, the largest elongated skulls on the planet are of the Paracas people, and the Paracas has been one of the centers of my studies because there's such an obscure either group or they may in fact have been a race of people. We don't know exactly where they came from. They seem to have appeared on the coast of Peru about 3,500 years ago, possibly. But again, I'm going to have to spend a lot more time in the Paracas area to see if I could push the dates back. But they have or had some physical characteristics which make them not distinctly Native American, especially in terms of their hair color. They had reddish brown hair, which is not a Native American characteristic. They were also quite tall. They seem to have averaged at least about 6 feet. And the skulls, the more that I'm researching the skulls, it seems that the oldest ones were natural, as in these people were born with elongated skulls, whereas over time, we find more and more cranial deformation occurring, where the skulls were intentionally bound in childhood in order to create that shape. And by the time we reach the Nazca people, again about 100 AD, the elongated skulls seem to disappear. And so that's why I think that the Nazca themselves conquered the Paracas and virtually wiped out the royal bloodline, which for which we distinguish the elongated skulls. Well, it is, but the thing is that basically all academics have stated that the elongated skulls were the result of a cultural process of cranial deformation, and so they say that every single skull was bound for some obscure reason. But the more that I've been able to research the actual skulls themselves in the area, then the more we're finding some skulls, probably about 5% of them, which appear to be far too complex in their shape to have simply been cranially deformed with some kind of textile or cord or placing boards or other materials on them. They are simply too natural looking for that, and that's obviously a very major part of my ongoing research. And the thing is, I've studied evolutionary biology, and I've also brought a number of physicians and nurses and dentists, and also had people drop into our little museum in Paracas, the Paracas History Museum, to look at the specimens themselves. We take them out of the cases and let people look at them, and so far there has been no medical professional that's been able to figure out why these skulls have the characteristics that they do. It's not just down to the idea that they were cranially deformed, but we also have larger eye sockets, strange holes in the backs of the skulls, very pronounced jaws. Kind of the sadness, I guess, is that some physicians have taken a fair amount of interest in what they see because they can't explain it based on disease or anything else, but none have really followed up afterwards to assist me in my work. That's the main theory, which makes a lot of sense, is that what you probably had was a relatively small population of people who looked the way they did with the elongated skulls, and through time they would have mixed with the majority who would have been normal humans, and so the elongated skull characteristic would gradually start to fade. And so I think that's why the cranial deformation began, because since these people were the elite, the royal bloodline, it would have been a characteristic or something that the succeeding generations would have at least tried to mimic, because they, of course, would have wanted the supposed high intelligence and knowledge and wisdom of these ancient people to continue to be part of the culture. Well, it is, and the thing is, the more I explore in other parts of Peru, like in the area of Cusco and south and north of there, as well as into Bolivia, where we find very intriguing places such as Tiwanaku, wherever we find megalithic buildings, as in buildings made with very large stones, which are incredibly tight-fitting and engineered, then we also find the presence of these ancient elongated skulled people as well, usually mislabeled as being part of the more recent culture. But since almost no carbon-14 or DNA testing has ever been done, suppositions like that by archaeologists that that these elongated skulls fit in with more contemporary cultures, I think, is wrong. Well, the major theory, which was Maria Reiche's theory, was that the ground was a copy of the sky, and so it was her belief that that the animal figures especially represented constellations, but they've done computer programming models, and there is not a significant relationship. There are some relationships, but the trouble is that it was her theory that that they were astronomical in nature, that the animal figures represented constellations, but computer modeling after her death has not shown a significant relationship between the Earth and the sky. So the thing is that Nazca is far more complicated than you can possibly cover with one specific theory, and that's why I wrote my book, due to the fact that that they were made over a relatively long time by at least two different cultures. There would have been different reasons for the different lines and figures, especially if we look at it from a geographical perspective, traveling from northwest to southeast. Well, actually, to put it really simply, what we're looking at is the fact that some of the geoglyphs and some of the lines are pointing to, for example, sunrise and sunset, possibly phases of the moon, but also taking into account the landscape and the fact that it's so dry, I think that many of the lines themselves represent underground water systems, because even today there is almost no water in Nazca itself in terms of rainfall, as we've discussed, but it's quite a major agricultural pocket in the middle of absolute bleak desert. So the water that feeds Nazca comes from the Andes and goes underground all the way to the ocean. And so I think the ancient people were in fact mapping underground river systems, which they would access as the land was becoming increasingly dry. So those are a few of the reasons. The area around Palpa, which is in between the Pacific coast and Nazca itself, you find very, very strange looking human beings with antenna on their heads, and also, the Palpa area is quite weird, and that's where people do draw ancient alien or ancient visitor connections, which I'm not opposed to. I think it's quite possible.
It's pretty
yeah. But what we do know for sure is that the famous astronaut was created by the Paracas elongated headed culture. It was not made by the later Nazca people. So it's a complex area. I'm very happy that we're going back there, so we'll get more of a chance to study them on the ground and in the air once again. And the great thing about the tours we conduct is that I tend to not like being the talking head all the time, since we do have very intelligent people who come on tour with us, sometimes engineers, and as I've said before, doctors and, housewives, etc. A lot of different theories come up, and I actually learn a lot from the people who come, because they bring their own knowledge, experience, and ideas from different parts of the world. I personally believe that Ancient Aliens focuses, for their own reasons, on the alien idea too much, whereas I have an open mind, and I like to look at all of the ideas, but what I do like to have is some kind of scientific underpinning to what I'm researching, because you do need to be able to not only educate or inform the general public, but you do have to have the capability of being able to work with inquiries, and in some cases criticism from academia if they attack my ideas or whatever. I wish to have the knowledge to be able to, I wouldn't say counterattack, but to be able to substantiate what it is I'm talking about, rather than saying, well, I think aliens did the work. Well, it is, and of course Graham Hancock has been through several years of being attacked.
Sure.
And in some cases, academics, I believe, have said, you're simply a journalist, you're not a scientist. And so, that is, I think, has been a very unfair criticism of Graham.
Yeah.
But also, since I do come from a scientific background and I work with people of a scientific mind, that's important, but it's not the whole thing. You also need a spiritual component, and also, just ideas from people who think with common sense, because in order to look at any of these ancient places, either in Egypt or Peru or Bolivia or almost anywhere, you really need to have a balanced mind approach. And so intuition, I believe, is fundamentally important. Logical perspectives are important. And putting all of this together is what creates a more general, broad, and I think coherent story, rather than simply saying, well, scientifically speaking, or spiritually speaking, spirituality and science can coexist with one another. Well, that's a very good point. And the thing is that it's not the domain simply of academics to look at any of this. I mean, you're talking about the history of humanity, so all humans should be allowed to look at any of these topics and be heard. And I'm very thankful for Graham, as you said, to approach this from a journalist's viewpoint and experience, because I believe that's what got him started was when he was living in Africa, and he had heard stories about the Ark of the Covenant, and so he decided to explore, that story, which he did very well in one book. And it's the it's the nature of an inquiring mind to continue on with that. I'm very thankful that, Graham and I will get to spend time with one another, because he's been a great teacher, and figurehead of mine. And as well, the reason why my wife and I do the tours is not, necessarily because it's a business. It's because we like to get the perspective of a general swath of the public. When they look at these things, when they look at megalithic sites, it could very well be a 10-year-old child, a nuclear physicist, a housewife from Alabama, or a shoemaker from California who has the best idea. You just never know. But depending solely upon someone with a PhD or other academic background is, it's useful, but it's not the whole thing. And I think it's important because we seem to be entering a time where people want more personal sovereignty. They're questioning the financial institutions, they're questioning the governments, they're questioning organized religion. And so history is part of that, because the more evidence that we are finding of the antiquity of some parts of the world, the more we're realizing that the general story we've been taught in school has been, I wouldn't say a lie, but just so limited to actually think that a group of slaves were responsible for something as profound as the massive and complex and precise pyramids in Giza is really kind of childish, now that we have input from engineers, stonemasons, etc., who look at these and say they have to be, and geologists, that these sites have to be older. And I think the more that we're able to push back the time frame of history, simply the more interesting we become as the descendants of very profound ancient ancestors. Basically, my books are through Amazon. Marzulli, who's a biblical scholar, coming to Peru to look at the elongated skulls as possible evidence of the Nephilim. And then after that, we have a documentary that we'll be working on with L.A. Marzulli for a couple of weeks. And then after that, we're returning to Egypt in late March with Stephen Mailer, as well as the possibility of a trip to South Africa to go to a conference, and then possibly Nazca. So the making of a straight line is not that complicated. It simply could have been surveyors with a series of sticks being put in the ground, the way that a fence is made. You start with one stick, then you go behind it with the next one, so you create a straight line, and then you put a third beyond that so that you have three in a row, and you just continue that process. But some of the lines do cut through the figures, and so it's my belief, at least, that at least some of these lines were created after the figures were in place, and it's either possible that the line makers didn't know that the geoglyph figures were there, or that they just discounted them as being the creation of some kind of lost culture, and they were no longer of any significance. No, none of the lines themselves seem to relate to the geoglyphs. If anybody looks on the internet, it's quite easy to find a map of the geoglyph figures of Nazca, and what you can see is that there is a relationship with some of them to the cardinal directions of west and east. And in terms of some of the lines, some lines travel in the same direction, but the lines themselves are so complicated and seemingly random that that's why it's been difficult for anyone to come up with one cohesive theory. However, I think, again, because quite a few of them are basically surface maps of underground water, that and water travels underground, based upon the path that it can take, depending upon the composition of the soil and the source of the water. That to put the to put it simply, the Nazca area is very complicated, and the process of producing the lines and figures took one could believe at least 1,000 years. Yeah, it could be, and the thing is that there, as some people and especially Eric von Daniken pointed out, there are these trapezoid shapes that appear to look like landing strips, but any sophisticated extraterrestrial culture, if they're able to either travel through our galaxy or intergalactic, they would have no reason to have runways.
Yeah.
So I think that's the silliest of the theories. There are also other theories that the Nazca people had in fact invented hot air balloons, which is unlikely but possible. But that's why any of these subjects, whether it be this or the strange megaliths we find around Cusco or Egypt or etc., it's a process of ongoing research that requires that we pool together as much information as possible. And also the wonderful thing about tours is that we have such a diverse selection or group of people that come on them, that each one of our tours is a research project. It's not simply like a holiday tour, even though they are entertaining and fun. We always get a lot more out of the tours than we ever think possible.
Sure.
Yeah, that's at the end of December. I've been invited for 2 days to be the guide in and around Cusco and also the Sacred Valley. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And not exactly sure what else is entailed with it. It's just I've been a fan of John Major Jenkins for quite a long time, and so it'll be an excellent opportunity. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk with you.